Who's up for some Prismacolor pencil colouring? Because today I'm going to show you a very simple blending method for Prismacolor pencils and a way to add light texture to your colouring. I've also got some tips and tricks throughout the whole video on how to use colouring pencils. So grab your colour pencils and I'm going to go for pinks and reds for the petals, yellows for the centre and highlights, and then greens for the leaves and stems. You're also going to need some pencil sharpeners, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And you can also have an eraser to hand. But it's very handy to have a soft brush and some very fine sandpaper, and I'll show you why in a bit. So this is actually an inkjet printed image, and it's one of the flowers that I've been working on recently, the anemone. And if you want to colour along with me, then you can find it over in my Etsy shop, and I'll put a link in the description. I've printed out high definition on Neenah Classic Crest card, which is very smooth cardstock and great for blending pencils and also your marker pens on. But if you don't have it, just find a nice smooth cardstock. So a Bristol Board will do as well. But as usual, I will put links to everything I've used and also a full list of my colours in the description below. So the trick with colouring pencils is to use layers and to start with the lightest layer and build up to the darkest layer. Now the thing with Prismacolor pencils is they're actually a waxed base pigment core. So this means as well as putting colour down, you're also putting wax down. And as that wax builds up, it gets harder and harder to blend the colours and to add more colours. So you kind of want to be patient with these pencils and use them very lightly. Definitely don't want to be pressing really hard with your pencils. So I started my stems and my leaves by putting in my highlights, and to do this I'll put a little bit of the cream coloured pencil just into my lightest areas for the stem and the leaves. You can't really see it because the camera can't pick it up, but it's more there for me to remember that these are the areas that I want to be lightest. I've then moved on to my lightest green, and I'm using that to colour the whole area. And I've got a choice here. I can either leave those highlighted areas untouched and just blend it at the edges, or I can put a light covering over the top. And for this leaf, I'm going to just put a light covering over the top, but you'll see in the other leaves that I leave those areas as highlights. So watch out for that as we move on. This is probably a good time for me to tell you how I pick my colours. Now, colouring an image like this where there's some very defined areas, and I'm going to have a pinky red flower, the yellowy centre and the green leaves, it's kind of very simple. I like to have at least 3 pencils for each area or each colour. So a light tone, a mid-tone and a dark tone. But this isn't always easy to do. I don't have a full set of pencils, and if you're starting out you probably don't have a full set of pencils. And anyway, in whatever pencils that you use, you might find that you don't have the full range and can't pick out the best light tone, mid-tone and dark tone. Prismacolor pencils are great because there's a massive amount of colours in the range, but you're still going to need to experiment to find your favourite ways of blending colours. And different people have different ways of blending even like a simple red. So experiment and see what you like, and you can build up your collection slowly. That's kind of how I've done it. I usually pick colours that I like and then a light tone and a dark tone around that colour. So I might buy 3 pencils at a time, for instance. So I have that colour and I can blend out with that colour too. But there's nothing stopping you mix and matching your colours. Now these layer really well, and just as any colour mixing, you can colour mix with pencils, but maybe that should be a video for another time. Let me know if you want more on colour pencils, because I'd be happy to do more videos. So this flower took me around about an hour 15 or thereabouts to colour, and we've been watching in real time up until this point, but I'm going to speed up the video now because otherwise it would just take too long to see it all in real time. Now that I've got a basic light covering of my light tone over the area that I'm colouring, I'll move on to my mid-tone. And I'm going to use my mid-tone in the areas that are going to be the darkest. So that's just under the petals. And also I'm going to just add a little bit of dark shading into other areas of the leaf as well, just to give it a bit more life. And from this point in, I kind of swap between my light tones and my mid-tones, and just blend out my mid-tones with my light tones. So layer on layer, I've got putting a little bit of dark tone down and then blending it out with a light tone until I get to a point where I'm happy with the way it looks. I'm keeping the colouring of this flower really simple. Most of the detail comes from the black line anyway, and all I'm really doing is adding a bit of light and shade to the areas. Now for the leaves and the stems, I'm going for a very blended look, so they should be quite smooth when finished. And for this I'm using very even strokes on the pencils. And some of the strokes will be very small, but other strokes will be quite big. But the main point here is to keep them even, so an even pressure throughout. You'll see as we move on to the petals that I change this up just a little bit, and I'll tell you more when we get there. So the other trick with Prismacolor pencils and colouring pencils in general is to keep them very sharp. The sharper the point, the more control you can have over the colouring. But because of the wax core with Prismacolor pencils, they are really fragile, and I have a big love-hate relationship with them and sharpening them. I've listed below the 2 pencil sharpeners that I currently use to keep my Prismacolor pencils sharp. Neither of them are perfect, unfortunately, but they're the best ones that I've found so far. However, there is an interim cure. And this is where the fine sandpaper comes in. You can bring your pencils back up to a point using fine sandpaper, just rubbing it to a point. It takes some of the agony out of trying to sharpen them again and again and again and having those cores break on you constantly. I don't think this is as much a problem with the Faber-Castell Polychromos, so if you're a fan of those, I think they've got a thicker core and they're also oil-based, so it's a different thing entirely. As in, I just think they're just easier to sharpen. And I am actually now starting to move over to the Faber-Castells. I'm adding more Faber-Castell Polychromos into my collection. And you'll see I'm actually using one here in this colouring project. Up until now I've just been using light and mid-tones, and now I'm going to put in my dark tones. This is like the very last thing that I do for an area. Now you might have spotted that I've got the equivalent of a crib sheet. Before I start any colouring project, I tend to do a kind of little, very small trial run. I won't do a whole colour. What I'll do is I'll just do swatches of the colours that I'm going to use, particularly if I'm not sure about how the pencils are going to blend together. Like for instance here, with my darkest green being more of a blue green and my light tone and my mid-tone being more a yellowy green, I wanted to check that they would blend together. So I've printed out the picture again, and that will be where I'll just do a quick test of the colours that I'm using. For my petals, I'm mixing in a pink, and this is actually one of my Polychromos pencils, and it should blend perfectly okay with the Prismacolors. Again, I'm just starting off this area really lightly with just a light coverage of that pink colour before moving on to my light reds and my mid-tone reds. And for those red colours, I'm going to concentrate very much on the shaded areas of the flower and the centre of the flower. So the intensity of the colour will be in those areas, and I'll blend out with that pink colour and also with the light red colour too. So again, it's just being patient and building up the layers. Now in the leaves and stems, I had a very even pencil pressure all the way through, so I wanted a very blended look, whereas with the petal, I'm just going to add in a little bit of texture. So again, my early layers are all going to be even pencil pressure. As I build up, I'm going to use some varied pencil pressure swipes. And this is where you swipe the pencil across the page, but allow it to lighten and lift as you get to the end of the swipe. So the pencil mark tailors off and becomes thinner and more wispy. For this nice fine line texture, you do need to keep the points of your pencils as pointed as you possibly can get them. As you're working and building up your layers, something that can happen is that you'll get little crumbs of the pencil core landing on your page. Now if you try to wipe these crumbs off with your fingers or your hand, then you do run the risk of just smearing that colour all over your page. So I find that the easiest way of getting rid of them is to actually just use a very soft brush and lightly brush them off the page. And you've probably spotted me doing that a few times as we've been working through this flower picture. Coloured pencils can be great fun to use and surprisingly versatile colouring medium that is often overlooked. I also like to use them on mixed media projects, and I do have another video where I've used them over gelatos, so please do go and have a look at that, and there's a link in the cards as well as in the description. Now if you're curious as to what I use this flower for, then you'll just have to wait until my next video where I will show all. So don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it, and hit that notification bell as well. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video and found it useful, then please do like it and share it with your friends. that would be amazing. And don't forget to let me know in the comments if coloured penciled videos is something you would like to see some more of from me. So it's a massive thank you for watching this video, and I can't wait to see your next project. So don't forget to link me up on social media. All my links are below, and I'll see you next time for another art, tips, tricks, techniques and inspiration video. So see you next time.